She didn't come back for him. She came for one signature on one piece of paper that would let her disappear for good, back to the studio apartment in St. Louis, where she'd spent the last 9 months learning how to breathe without watching over her shoulder. What Iris had not planned on was the elevator being out of service. The lobby of the Lakeshore Tower smelled exactly the way she remembered. Cold marble, expensive cologne, the faint burned coffee undertone from the security desk. She stood in the revolving door 2 seconds longer than she should have, her wool coat straining across the massive swell of her stomach, her breath fogging in the November air still clinging to her from outside. 7 months, 3 weeks. The baby had been sitting low since Tuesday, a persistent downward pressure that made every flight of stairs feel like a punishment. The lobby guard recognized her before she recognized him. Miss Weld. He was on his feet, and the tone of his voice, not "can I help you," but the flat, stunned register of a man who had been told something very different, made the back of her neck prickle. "I have an appointment with Whitmore," Iris said. Her voice came out level. She was good at level. She had spent 9 months practicing level in a city where no one knew her name. "4th floor. I'll take the stairs." He glanced at her stomach. He was young. He had the grace to look uncertain rather than cruel. "Mrs. Weld, stairwell access above the 2nd floor requires a key card. Then call Whitmore's office and tell him I'm here." The guard pressed 2 fingers to his earpiece. His eyes went to the elevators, then back to her. His jaw tightened in a way that had nothing to do with her and everything to do with whoever was speaking in his ear. "Mr. Cavett will see you in his office. Suite 300. The floor dropped out of her stomach. "I'm not here to see Mr. Cavett." "No, ma'am." The guard's voice was carefully blank. "But Mr. Cavett is aware you're here." She stood very still for a moment. The lobby's climate control hummed. The baby shifted, a slow, rolling weight that pressed into her ribs and settled back down apparently unconcerned. Of course, she thought. Of course there were cameras in the lobby. Of course he'd be notified the second his biometric system logged her face. She had a spreadsheet. She did not have a plan for this. Iris crossed the lobby. Bram was waiting outside Suite 300. Cavett's right hand was a man built like a lintel, wide, solid, and seemingly structural. He'd been with the organization since before Iris came on as their financial analyst 3 years ago, and he had never, in all that time, shown anything that could be classified as surprise. He looked surprised now. His eyes went to her face first, habit, trained threat assessment, then dropped, stayed. A single muscle in his jaw moved. "Iris," he said. "Bram." She pulled the folder from her tote bag and held it against her chest. "I'm not here to cause problems. I need 20 minutes with Whitmore to notarize a document releasing me from the NDA, and then I will be out of this building and out of this city. I need Cavett's signature, which Whitmore confirmed he authorized remotely last week. I don't need to see him. I just need the notarization." Bram looked at the folder, looked at her stomach, looked at the door to the office. "He's in there," he said. "I know. He saw you on the lobby feed." "I know." "Iris." Bram's voice dropped a register. He was not a man who pleaded. He was a man who stated facts with varying degrees of urgency. "He thought you were dead. For 4 months he thought the Ashford crew had taken you. He had men in 6 states turning over rocks." The words hit her somewhere below the sternum. She absorbed them the way she'd learned to absorb difficult numbers. Find where the error is. Don't flinch. Recalculate. "I didn't know that," she said quietly. "I'm sorry." "You should tell him that." "I can't." She looked at the door. "Bram, I genuinely cannot walk in there, and I can't do this with him. Please, if he signed the authorization, let me go upstairs to Whitmore's office. 20 minutes and I'm gone." Bram was quiet for a long moment. The hallway's ventilation system breathed. "He revoked the authorization this morning," Bram said, "when the lobby pinged your face." Iris closed her eyes. She counted to 4. She opened them. Of course he did. The door to Suite 300 opened from the inside. She had prepared herself, or believed she had. 9 months was a long time. She had assembled a reasonably complete list of reasons Sterling Cavett was not a person she should allow back into her life, and she had reviewed that list regularly, the way she reviewed any important document. The list was thorough. It was logical. It was 12 items long. It did not help at all. Cavett filled the doorway, dark charcoal suit, no tie, top button of his collar open. He looked exactly the same and completely different. The same broad shoulders, the same grey, beginning to salt the dark at his temples, the same set to his jaw that she had always privately called the ledger face, the expression he wore when he was running numbers, and the numbers weren't adding up. The scar at the left side of his throat caught the hallway light. She had never asked about that scar. She had been smart enough to understand which questions she was not owed answers to. He was looking at her, the way the lobby guard had not allowed himself to look at her. Completely, entirely, with the kind of still, absolute attention Cavett usually reserved for things he was considering acquiring. The silence stretched 4 seconds past comfortable. 5. "You're alive," he said. "Yes." Another beat. His eyes dropped to her stomach and came back up, and something in his expression did what Iris had not believed Sterling Cavett's expression was capable of doing. It fractured. Not dramatically, not loudly, just a small internal collapse, a load-bearing beam developing a crack that hadn't been there before. She watched it happen and felt something she could not afford to feel. "Come inside," he said. It was not a request. The office was exactly as she remembered, floor-to-ceiling windows facing the lake, the water iron grey today, November-beaten. His desk was clear except for a single open folder and a pen he'd clearly set down the moment the lobby alert had come through. The folder had her name on the tab. She did not ask what was in it. Bram pulled the door shut from outside. They were alone. Iris stayed near the door. Her lower back had been aching since the cab from Union Station, a deep grinding pressure that had become so constant over the last 2 weeks she barely registered it anymore. She registered it now. She shifted her weight. Her coat hadn't closed over her stomach in a month. She was holding it shut with one hand. "I need your signature," she said. "The NDA release. Whitmore has the form upstairs. I have a job offer from a legitimate accounting firm in St. Louis. They ran a background check, and the NDA flagged. I need to be released from it, or I lose the offer." She set the folder on the edge of his desk without crossing all the way to it, close enough that he could see the document inside. "You already authorized it," Whitmore confirmed. "I don't understand why you revoked it this morning." Cavett had not moved from the center of the room. "How far along are you?" he asked. Iris's jaw tightened. "That's not relevant to—" "How far along?" She looked at the window. The lake looked back. 7 months, 29 weeks. The silence this time lasted long enough that she turned back to look at him. He was doing the math. She could see it. The same deliberate internal calculation he applied to everything. He was a man who trusted numbers above all other forms of information. And right now, the numbers were telling him something he was having trouble processing. "You left 9 months ago," he said. "Yes. You were already pregnant when you left." It wasn't a question. She answered it anyway. "I didn't know when I left. I found out 3 weeks later." A pause. "I'm sorry, Cavett. I know that doesn't fix the math." He turned away from her and walked to the window. He stood with his back to her, hands in his pockets, looking out at the water. His shoulders were rigid. The scar on the back of his left hand, the one she had also so never asked about, was visible from across the room. "You should sit down," he said finally. "Your coat is soaking wet. You came from the train station." "I'm fine standing." "You're also too stubborn to admit when you're not fine." He turned around. "That hasn't changed." "Sit down, Iris. I'll get you something warm. And then you're going to tell me what actually happened 9 months ago, not the version where you needed a fresh start. The real version." Mrs. Pollard, the building's executive floor housekeeper, a woman Iris had liked enormously because she treated Cavett with the exasperated patience of someone who had raised difficult children and recognized the type, arrived without being summoned, which told Iris that Bram had called ahead. She brought tea and a small plate of shortbread, and she took one look at Iris's wet coat and said, "Give me that. You'll freeze sitting in wet wool," and had the coat off Iris's shoulders before Iris could object. Mrs. Pollard's expression, when the full shape of Iris's pregnancy became visible, was composed. She was a professional, but she glanced at Cavett with the swift, assessing look of a woman recalibrating a significant number of prior assumptions, and then she left without a word. Iris sat. The leather chair was soft, and she hadn't sat in anything soft since the train, and her body registered the relief before her dignity could stop it. She exhaled. She ate one piece of shortbread without deciding to. Cavett sat on the edge of the desk, not behind it, on the edge, arms crossed. He watched her eat the shortbread with an expression she couldn't read. "The Ashford crew took a shot at you in September," she said. "Not at you. At the building. I was in the financial records room on the second floor when the window blew in." She kept her voice flat, the way she kept numbers flat. "I found out I was pregnant 3 days before that. I hadn't told you yet." She looked at the shortbread. "After the window, I understood something I'd been choosing not to understand for 2 years. The people who want to hurt you will go through anyone near you to do it. I'm not a bodyguard, Cavett. I'm an accountant. I balance ledgers. If they had known I was carrying your child, I would not have been collateral." She looked up at him. "I would have been the primary strategy, so I left. I took nothing that was yours. I wasn't trying to take the child from you. I was trying to keep it alive." The room was very quiet. Cavett uncrossed his arms. He set his hands flat on the desk behind him, and she watched the knuckles whiten briefly. "You could have told me. You would have locked me in a room with 6 bodyguards and declared war on the Ashfords." A beat. "Yes. I know." She held his gaze. "I know that's what you would have done. And I know you believe that would have been keeping me safe. But I've read your ledgers for 2 years, Sterling. I know what your wars cost. I know what they cost the people around you. I was not willing to spend the next decade waiting to find out which column my child would end up in." She had never used his first name before, not once in 3 years. She watched it land. His jaw shifted. He was quiet for a long time. "The Ashfords are gone," he said. "I dismantled them in January." "I didn't know that." "I know you didn't." He looked out the window. "I know exactly where you were in January. You were in a furnished room in Kansas City. You moved to St. Louis in April." Iris's throat tightened. "You had someone following me." "I had someone making sure you were alive." A pause. "They reported. They did not interfere. I told them not to." He looked back at her. "I told them not to, Iris. That should count for something." She thought about a man she'd never seen sitting outside a furnished room in Kansas City, watching a woman who didn't know she was being watched, sending quiet reports back to Chicago. She thought about Cavett reading those reports at this desk and choosing not to reach through them. She thought it probably did count for something. She wasn't ready to say so yet. "I need the signature," she said. "I know." He was quiet. "I'm going to sign it." He reached behind him and pushed her folder aside. Underneath it was a different document entirely. He turned it so she could read the header. She had not expected a trust document. She read it twice. Her throat did something complicated. "Cavett. It's clean. Whitmore drew it up 6 months ago. He said it the way he said everything. Factual, stripped of performance. It's in the child's name. Nothing traceable to the organization. Nothing that creates exposure for you or requires ongoing contact with me." A pause. "I didn't know you were pregnant when I had it drawn up. I had it drawn up because you had worked for me for 3 years. You had been exposed to things you should not have been exposed to, and you were carrying risk that originated from my side of the ledger." His eyes moved to her stomach, briefly, then back to her face. "It needed to be accounted for." She stared at him. "You made a trust fund for a child you didn't know existed." "I made a provision for a liability that originated from my ledger." His voice was careful. "That's how I justified it to myself. I'm aware it's not the only way to describe it." Iris looked down at the document. Then she looked up at him. "You thought I was dead for 4 months." Yes. And you still had Whitmore draw up a provision for a hypothetical child. The child was not hypothetical, he said. The child was mine to account for whether you were present to confirm it or not. A pause. I'm aware that is a strange thing to say. I'm not particularly skilled at saying the correct thing, I've been told. She had told him, twice in the course of her employment. She remembered both times. She looked at the trust document for another moment. Then she set it on the coffee table. I can't stay in Chicago, she said. I want that to be clear before we discuss whatever it is you think we're discussing. I have a life in St. Louis, a real one. It's small and careful, and I built it myself. I'm not asking you to stay in Chicago. Then what are you asking? He was quiet for a moment. For Cavett, quiet was not absence of thought. It was the sound of something being calculated. She had learned that. I'm asking, he said finally, to be in the accounting. She looked at him. The child is mine. I want to be in the accounting, whatever form that takes. He held her gaze, and something in his expression was stripped of its usual precision, uncertain in a way Sterling Cavett almost never permitted himself to be uncertain. I just want a matter on the balance sheet. The baby moved, a firm, rolling shove against Iris's left side that was becoming her daughter's, her child's, preferred method of commentary on whatever was happening outside. Iris pressed her hand against the spot instinctively. Cavett's eyes went to her hand. He stopped. She had never heard him start a sentence he didn't know how to finish. She took his hand. She didn't think about it. She just reached out and pressed his palm flat against the side of her stomach, in the warm spot where the movement had been. 3 seconds of stillness. 4. The baby kicked, sharp and definitive, the kick of someone with strong opinions about interruptions. Cavett's entire body went motionless. The thing that had been contained and controlled and calculated in his face for the past 40 minutes simply ceased. His hand stayed perfectly still against her stomach, and his jaw shifted, and his eyes went very bright and entirely unguarded, and Iris looked away first, because it felt like looking at something private. She does that, Iris said, her voice coming out softer than she'd intended. She has opinions about everything. She, he repeated. His voice was low and rough around the edges. I don't know. I didn't want to find out. I keep saying she. She paused. It felt like a she. He didn't say anything. He kept his hand pressed against her stomach. She could feel the warmth of his palm through the fabric of her maternity top, and she allowed herself, for exactly this moment, to stop calculating what it meant. Whitmore's notarization took 11 minutes. Cavett signed both documents, the NDA release and the trust acknowledgement. Without trying to negotiate terms or attach conditions, he signed where Whitmore indicated. He set the pen down. He looked at Iris across the conference table with the expression she would come to think of, later, on the train back, as the real ledger face, the one underneath the one he wore in the room. I'll drive you to the station, he said. I have a cab. The cab can be reimbursed. He was already standing. It's 22 degrees outside, and you walked 2 blocks from Union Station this morning in a wet coat. You're not walking back. That's extremely presumptuous. It's arithmetic. Cold plus wet plus 7 months pregnant plus 2 blocks equals a problem I can prevent. I prefer preventing problems to resolving them after the fact. He held the conference room door open. You can argue with me in the car. She walked past him into the hallway. I remember exactly why I found you exhausting, she said. You found me exhausting because I was correct more often than was convenient. He fell into step beside her at a careful distance. He didn't crowd her, didn't reach for her elbow the way she'd half expected. You're very good at tolerating inconvenient correctness. That is the nicest thing you have ever said to me. I know. I've been saving it. She laughed. She hadn't planned to. The laugh came out small and involuntary and slightly horrified at itself. And when she glanced at him, his mouth had done something that on any other man would have been called a smile. The car to Union Station took 14 minutes. They did not talk about the future. They did not negotiate visiting schedules or custody arrangements, or any of the enormous, necessary, terrifying things that lived in the space between I want to be in the accounting and I have a life in St. Louis. Those conversations had forms and rules, and they would have them eventually through Whitmore's office, or something like it, in language that could be examined and held to. They sat in the back of the black car, and Iris watched the lake go past. Still iron-grey, still November-beaten, and the baby settled into a low, rocking stillness that she'd come to recognize as something close to contentment. At the station drop-off, Cavett got out first and held the door. She stood on the sidewalk in the cold, the documents in her tote bag, her coat closed again over the swell of her stomach. A porter with a luggage cart angled past them. The station exhaled its constant breath of diesel and crowd noise. "Whitmore will reach out in January," Cavett said, "after." "Okay. If you need anything before then, anything logistical, you have Bram's number." "I have Bram's number." He looked at her for a moment. The wind off the lake had gotten into his hair. He looked less composed than usual, and she thought it suited him. "Take care of her," he said. "Or him." "I have been," Iris said. "That's the whole story." Something moved through his face. He nodded once. She went inside. She did not look back, which was a choice she had made in the cab from Union Station that morning and held to now. Some decisions became real in the holding of them. She walked through the grand hall with its vaulted ceilings and its cathedral winter light, her coat closed over the 9 months she'd just half-resolved in an 11-minute notarization and a 14-minute car ride, and she found her platform, and she sat down on a bench, and she pressed both palms flat against her stomach, and she breathed. The baby pushed back, steady, warm present. "I know," Iris said quietly, to the daughter she was mostly sure she was carrying. "I know, we'll figure it out." The train arrived at 2:47, exactly on time. 6 weeks later, in a hospital in St. Louis with adequate staff and an epidural that worked, and 17 hours of labor that were long and exhausting and entirely unglamorous, her daughter was born at 4:18 in the morning, screaming with the full-throated certainty of someone who had been waiting a very long time to make her opinions known. She weighed 6 pounds 2 ounces. She was 3 weeks early and absolutely fine. Iris named her on the birth certificate without asking anyone's permission. Cavett's name was on it too. She had not told him in advance. She figured he was the kind of man who would want to know the math had been corrected before he was asked to discuss his feelings about it. She was right. He called at 6 a.m. when Whitmore forwarded the certificate. He did not say anything for 3 seconds, which for Sterling Cavett was a long time. "Thank you," he said finally. "She's in the ledger," Iris said, hollowed out and bone-tired and entirely certain. "You're in the ledger, that's what you asked for." A pause. She could hear him breathing. She thought he might be sitting very still in the office with the lake view, the same way he'd been sitting 2 months ago, when she walked in with her folder and her spreadsheet and her plan that had not survived contact with a broken elevator. "Get some rest," he said. "I'm going to sleep for approximately 1 week." "Good." Another pause. "Iris." "What?" "You did well," he said. "With all of it. I want that on the record." She closed her eyes. Outside the hospital window, St. Louis was just beginning to get light. "It's on the record," she said.